Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. It's that time. Coveted autopsy reports. And if you're catching us on the YouTube channel, our facial expressions might be somewhat subdued, humble, maybe even a little bit flared up, because obviously we may feel a little emotional about this week's autopsy reports. But it might not be for the reasons that you think. It might be because of the irony of how this year's NBA playoffs has kind of welcomed us with parity and has also welcomed us with realistic understanding about where we are in the climate of the NBA. But that's exactly why we have shows like ours to be able to go through those conversations. And today might actually be the episode where we no longer have to play medical examiner, but might actually have to be the what do they call those? Police psychiatrists, right? Like we might have to talk through the therapy of this, and not be because we're going to be talking about obviously our team, right? The team that we obviously root for, care about, that sort of thing. But we may have to lend ourselves to the other two teams that we're going to be putting on the slab. So let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw. What's good, my friend? Listen, I'm not feeling bad about it, but I can't lie. I got some things to say. There may not be enough soapbox for us to stand on, for us to be speaking to these things, but I'm not saying that it's only just for the Boston Celtics. It's going to be for them other two teams that we'll be addressing in the autopsy reports as well, too, because we are feeling some kind of way about how they got ousted.
Yeah, well, the NBA has not given us any shortage of topics to discuss, right? And the NBA playoffs have really given us so much to digest. So much of what we thought we knew, we clearly didn't as a basketball society. And it was ripe for surprises. But we probably utilize a little grief counseling, I think, on this. And then I know in the medical profession, you're not supposed to operate, on loved ones and things of that nature. Alas, here we are. Nevertheless, no one's here to stop us. So yes, it might get a little sloppy. We might make a little
miss an artery.
Goes a little awry.
Might miss a ventricle.
It's fine. It's fine.
we may miss a vital organ here or there.
Yeah, but our fans will have to ride out with it because yes, the Boston Celtics are out of the first round, pseudo unexpectedly. And I'll get into my pseudo soapbox aspect of that as well too, but this is a wild autopsy report because I will say all three of the teams we're discussing here were predicted and were the favorites to win their first round matchups, and all three of them lost under very, very different circumstances.
Absolutely. But I think the other thing that we want to make sure that we set expectations to our listeners is this is not just about us looking at this in hindsight because of what happened when they got eliminated. This, I think, is going to be more of a comprehensive understanding in its totality that I think will lend itself to better understanding what may need to happen moving forward. That's the whole purpose of the autopsy reports. So, yes, there is going to be some energy that is very palpable, right, as far as what we've experienced with the teams that got eliminated and how they got eliminated. But in no way, shape, or form is it a reflection of just saying we're angry because we're looking at what happened either in a game 6 or game 7 of a playoff series. It's a reflection of what the teams did and didn't do to put themselves in the best position possible for people to really buy into, or not even say people, but for ourselves to buy fully into why they did not achieve what I think many other people expected them to achieve. But in our realistic expectations, we knew that there was going to be a coming to Jesus moment. There was going to be a coming to reality moment with some of these teams. And lo and behold, it just happened to be other teams that kind of exposed it that we didn't expect were in a position to do so.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a lot to get into, man. So let's jump right in. We got some bills and stuff to pay, so it's going to be a wild one, folks. Buckle in.
Buckle up. Exactly. So as always, be sure to get my man Shaw at D Warren Shaw. Get at me at Game Face Leader. Show's Twitter handle NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You can go to www.thebaselineNBA.com to not only check out this episode, but also the episodes of our coveted autopsy reports that we got here for your listening pleasure. If you're catching us on the YouTube channel, we'd like to say hello to you and yours. And if you see the blue and white logo down in the bottom lower corner, just know that we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. 19 Media Group, we run in these content streets. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to not only check us out, but also the great family of content creators that are part of the 19 Media Group family. All right, with that being said, Callie Warren Shaw, we got a coveted autopsy reports. 3 teams on the slab. We'll be discussing the Boston Celtics, the Denver Nuggets, and the Houston Rockets. So do not go anywhere. But before we do, we got to let you know this episode of the Baseline NBA Podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. The regular season is wrapped and the NBA playoffs are finally here. And there's no better way to cash in on the high-flying hoops action than with PrizePicks, a preferred partner of the NBA. Every bucket, every dime, and every win means more when you're playing on PrizePicks. So don't pass up on your next shot with PrizePicks and get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. And don't miss PrizePicks Do It Live 2026 NBA Finals Sweepstakes. Pick live squares during the NBA playoffs, and you can win a trip for 2 to the NBA Finals. To enter, just make a $5 lineup with at least one live NBA player pick during any part of the 2026 NBA playoffs. Live player picks are picks made after a game is already in progress. And you can mix and match sports or leagues. Combine your NBA playoff selections with a little baseball action right in the PrizePicks app. So what are you waiting for? Download the PrizePicks app today and pick your first game winner, spread, or total as the playoff push rolls on. And get $50 in daily fantasy lineups when you play your first $5 lineup when you use the code CLNS. That's code CLNS to get $50 in daily fantasy lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, you know how to do it. You know how to play. Come on, get your game on with PrizePicks. Coming up, Sean and I get into the autopsy reports. Don't go anywhere. Time now for our coveted autopsy report. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. And the first team that we're going to be putting on the slab for the autopsy report will be the Boston Celtics. If people are paying attention to the Boston Celtics, amazing regular season given the circumstances that led itself to people's expectations of them possibly being a finals candidate, right? Second seed in the Eastern Conference. But their first round matchup, which was against the Philadelphia 76ers, basically lent itself to coming up to some realistic, how do I want to say, moments of a team that clearly was not in a position to be ready for the spotlight, ready to stand on its own, ready to take the mantle over and be kind of like, a stewardship of hope for anyone that's going to be coming out of the Eastern Conference, to give people some kind of optimism about whether or not they're going to be able to match up with somebody from the West. And again, that was what the early onset expectations are when Jason Tatum came back for the final 10 games of the regular season and helped the Celtics amass themselves to that second seed. We instantly catapulted the Boston Celtics from a team that, was even believable to be able to make a deep run if they didn't have Jason Tatum. But with having them, there was this expectation that they were obviously the best team in the Eastern Conference, completely discrediting the New York Knicks, completely discrediting the Detroit Pistons. And guess what? Their fall from grace was about as amazing as you could possibly ask a situation, Shaw. So I'm going to stop there, right? And I'm going to let you get into the digs because I know you've had a couple of things that you wanted to kind of set the tone and the tenor about what we need to say regarding this Boston Celtics team and what the Boston Celtics may actually look like and what the interpretations are of this Boston Celtics team given the outcome of their first round exit.
A lot to get into. So borrow something that we did on Ball and Buds. If you were to close your eyes and say the Boston Celtics at the beginning of the season lost in the first round in a 7-game series, you would have said, oh man, the Boston Celtics had a pretty good season because conventional wisdom said this was supposed to be the gap year. They were probably still good enough to be, a play-in team. So you would have said, oh, they got into the play-in. They were the 7 seed and they ended up losing in the first round. They pushed that team to 7 games. Wow, what an amazing season. But context is literally frigging everything. This team kind of lured everybody into a sense of security, so to speak, by overachieving with 56 wins, primarily without Jason Tatum. He came back for the last 20 games of the season. Added Vucevic, wasn't really much of a factor after trading Anthony Simons, et cetera, but they get into a first-round matchup against a team that's probably not a true 7 seed, and all the things went in, I think, Philadelphia's way, so to speak, in terms of them getting healthy and then being able to figure out Boston's inefficiencies and their proneness to be a little bit, and I've said this many, many times, to be a little bit cocky. This is the Celtics team now that has 3 flameouts in the last 4 years. And yes, there's a championship in there. So you can't discredit that. They've won an NBA championship, and a lot of teams would wish to be in that position. But what expectation for Boston and then what ends up happening in terms of the reality for the Celtics have not been aligned. And the way they've lost leaves people wondering, well, what the hell is going on? Because they're devastating. Like these are devastating L's. And anytime you lose, like, oh man, and you're going to lose more than you win in the NBA. We all understand that. But if you take it back to the 0-3 situation with Miami, having to come back and then lose that or whatever the case may be, yes, they win the championship, not discrediting that. Then blowing 2 20-point leads on your home floor against the Knicks and losing that. And now in this series, losing 3 home games in the first round against a very, very good and game 76ers opponent. But they took Philly for granted. They did. They thought we could just roll the balls out there and we can figure it out. This team has an identity crisis when the threes are not falling. It's kind of like the same old adage, and I know it's old hat, so to speak. Oh, we know we shoot a lot of threes. That's how they play. You just got to get over it. They need a counter, and unfortunately, they got beat. Joel Embiid came back, turned this series around. Tyrese Maxey was able to figure things out. Nick Nurse was like, "Listen, we'll play the numbers. We'll play your Joe Mazzulla ball, and we'll beat you at that." And the Boston Celtics are going home here in the first round of the NBA playoffs.
All right, so I don't want to belabor the point, because we're going to have a conversation at some point maybe about the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't know if I completely agree with the idea that, the Philadelphia 76ers were not a legit 7-seeded team or things of that nature. I still have some feelings about how I see the Philadelphia 76ers, and maybe part of that is going to come to fruition in our predictions later on, hopefully when we have our previews conversations about the second round, because they got to deal with the New York Knicks. But I'm going to say something about what the Philadelphia 76ers did do. The Philadelphia 76ers did show and expose exactly everything that you talked about regarding this Boston Celtics team. And I think the biggest thing that I'm saying here, and I don't want people to act like, okay, I'm in my feels and in my moment. I want people to really understand I don't get to this point unless I'm truly speaking to what it is I continually keep seeing and what it was that I was questioning back when Joe Mazzulla took over as the head coach. It's not that I don't think Joe Mazzulla is a great head coach. He's a good head coach. He's a good head coach. And I think to a fault, even he believes his own hype. He believes his own ish. He believes that his ish don't stink. And when a good coach, right, counters him, I don't know if he just decides to stay dogged in his perspective and his approach to things, but he clearly has shown time and time and again to not put the Celtics in a position where they can adjust, where he can actually do something that doesn't seem so far-reaching, right? And when I say far-reaching, I mean realistic into the context of what it is that you're dealing with and what it is that you're lacking, an emphasis on putting more onus on guys to say, this is what we got to do better at, even if it means doing less of the thing that got you to where you feel like you needed to be in shooting the threes. Like, I've said for the longest time, I don't have a problem with you jacking up 53s, but what I have a problem is if you're going to do that, own what shows your weaknesses when you get exposed, when the threes don't fall. You don't rebound the ball well. You don't stop the opposing team from making the threes. You don't have the same kind of defense that you claim that you're supposed to have when you've got 2 all defensive players in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown on your squad, and even Derek White to some degree, but they seem to not want to do that when it matters the most. And that's what happens when you deal with this Boston Celtics team. It's like if they're not in their offensive zone, everything else falls apart. And that is not how you win in the NBA. That is not how you win in the current climate of the NBA. If you're going to be dogged in your approach, be all the way in and make sure that you own it when you do not win. And the thing that bothered me most, and we'll get into the coaching, right? The thing that bothered me the most is what Joe Mazzulla said in the post conference. He said, well, what do you think happened? Like, how do you think that this all went bad? And he goes, because Joel Embiid is back. What? What are we talking about here? Joel Embiid has always been there. The problem is that Joel Embiid is never at 100%. The problem is that Joel Embiid, when it matters the most, usually comes up short. But it's always when he plays the Celtics that he will have good games. Do you know why the Boston Celtics never worry about Joel Embiid? You know why the Boston Celtics had won every single series since 1982 when they played against him in the playoffs? Is because the Boston Celtics went and handled business on the other aspects that Joel Embiid can't help them in. So if Joel Embiid goes out and drops 40, Tyrese Maxey should not be dropping 30. And you've got enough bodies to throw at Tyrese Maxey. You've got enough guys. But again, to your point, this is what happens when that air of arrogance, when things don't fall exactly the way that they're supposed to, when they don't land exactly the way that they need to. And then this is what becomes of the Boston Celtics. We see the most egregious choke jobs that takes place. I don't care what anyone tells me. I will stand on this hill to the day I die. And people can tell me differently. But last year, the Boston Celtics should have advanced against the New York Knicks, not because they were the better team than the Knicks. The Knicks had the better roster. But the Celtics had 2 games to put themselves in a position where they didn't have to sit there and get and choke, where they didn't have to sit there and make it harder for themselves to then have to figure out and win games. And then ultimately they lose Jason Tatum ultimately for a year because they're so dependent on their 2 superstars. And then this year you have a 3-1 series lead against a Sixers team, which by all accounts have not had their top players play together for more than 20 games in the season. And suddenly they look like a team that's played longer than the Boston Celtics. Man, I don't want to hear these excuses. And then when your head coach gets up there and makes some sort of excuse saying Joel Embiid is the reason why they took that series, here's why I call BS on what Joe Mazzulla just said, because that's a slap in the face to Tyrese Maxey. You want to ask me who actually put that team where they were? And it was always consistently the better player in most situations that the Celtics should have won games that they lost. Tyrese Maxey was that reason. He is the reason why Joel Embiid can stand there to do that. Okay.
I see your hype.
Yeah.
So I think in the same vein, right? Mazzulla also indicated that he was asked and challenged, like, well, do you think it's time to have a counter, right? Is this going to be the threes don't go in, we're going to lose, the threes go in, we win? And he said, well, it's dependent on the roster. And he's like, well, you give me 5 post-up players, then we'll start to post up more. I think he is, the word you use, dogged, I think is the perfect. He is dogged in his approach. Brown came out at the end of the game and also said, hey, I wish he would have played with more pace, like how we did in the fourth quarter. He didn't utilize coaching now. He didn't utilize a lot of the guys for a good majority of the series, trying to rely on Tatum and Brown. Tatum also, ultimately, it's hindsight for sure, but hey, if they close out business, you're not in a game 6 where you're playing 42 minutes. And maybe Tatum doesn't have to go through this, and they couldn't take a chance with him in game 7. Like, there's just so many things weird with, I think, the Mazzulla approach at times that, yeah, when it works, he's the best coach in the NBA. When it doesn't, you get into the conversations in a sense that we're kind of having right now. I also want to kind of like kick some things back right now aside of the coaching, because, I want to shout out to some of our friends and, or I guess, not so good friends on TikTok, because I put a clip out there where you had indicated, and I think the AI, if you will, of the clip put it wrongly. So this is just a little bit of acquittal here. It was like, oh, the Achilles heel for the Celtics of the 76ers, which you indicated, right? It was taken out of context for TikTok's post. It's like, oh, the 76ers haven't beaten the Celtics since 1982, like all the things, right? But you indicated that Embiid is a problem for Boston. And all these people jumped into the comments and it was like, what are you talking about? We whooped them. And that was the same day Embiid came back and Boston won game 4. Please delete this post when the series ends in the next game, whatever. Here we are now, a week later. It was all good just a week ago. Celtics are home. They're home. And the 76ers are marching on. And a lot of it is to, I think, Mazzulla's overall approach. And there's going to be some things that we do need to reconcile in terms of how this roster is built. Now that they were out of the tax, they can now dip back into it if they were so inclined, in essence, to kind of do that. But the roster needs to reflect an ability to do more than shoot threes. That has to be the case here. And or playing with faster pace. Despite all the offense and all the threes, they were 30th in pace this year as a team. 30th. So something needs to give there, where you saw what they were doing in the fourth quarter, where they were flying up and down the court. and able to try to get back in the game, but they shouldn't have been in that situation to begin with.
All right, I'm gonna say this other aspect of this as well too, because I want people to understand. And listen, you know me, Shaw. I really don't give a crap. You know what I'm saying? No, keep it 100. I really don't give a shit what people perceive from a misinterpretation of what a TikTok, or an AI generated clip, misrepresents. I know what I said, right? I know how I feel, and I'm gonna stay on that until somebody, convinces me otherwise. So if the only reason that most people are gonna have something to say is more to be insulting about my perspective or comment to it, so be it. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? Because what we're talking about is more than just about what one game was a reflection of. What this is an indicative and a persistency of this lack of attention to detail when it comes to how the Celtics have to make adjustments on a game-to-game basis in order to make sure that they can continue to execute the things that they say that they want to execute. Okay? That's all that I'm saying. I think that's the biggest indictment about the Boston Celtics in this 5-year stretch, of which, yes, you won a championship. But I'm going to take you back to when the Celtics won the championship. The Celtics not won the championship, yes, because they had the better team. But the reason why they had the better team is, to your point, Shaw, they had players that played multiple aspects of what is needed to win games. You had rebounding guards. You had three-point shooting centers or, wing players that could shoot the three. You had wing players playing defense. You had guys that Mazzulla could mix and match in so many different ways to mask up some of that dogged mentality. But when it really comes down to it, Shaw, what it really matters the most is that versatility has to be applicable on defending, right? So when people watch that score about the Sixers, like that was a 109-100 score. Oh, well, the Celtics still play good defense. It was a low-scoring game. I want you to watch how the fourth quarter ended. I want you to watch when the Celtics worked their way back into a one-point game, right? A game in which, if on a game 7, you shouldn't be down 15 at home against the Philadelphia 76ers. But I'm not even talking about that. This has been happening all season long against teams that they know that they could play better defensively, and they don't go out and give themselves a chance. Even if you work that hard to get yourself within striking distance. And then when you're asked to make a play, offensive execution, what is it you go back and you do? It's not even that you go and you take the three. It's the type of three that you take. It's how you execute. And we've been watching this over and over through the course of this season that lends itself to what you were talking about, Shaw. Maybe this really does come down to Brad Stevens going deep in his bag and finding something to give Mazzulla a reason to keep acting the way that he's acting with the roster that has been given to him. You can make the argument that he's coached up some of those role players, sure, but none of those role players helped in any part of the situation to put the Celtics in where they are. They are still so dependent on Tatum. They're still so dependent on Brown. You didn't even play Vucevic. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, if you are in a game 7 and I'm throwing everything out. I'm putting everything out there because I do not want to have the conversation about what I didn't do to give ourselves a chance to be advancing in the next round, or what I didn't do to put us in the best position so we don't have the situations that come up when they came up.
A couple of clarifying points, because it's the second time you said this, and we need to be intimately clear because people do watch what we say. You've said the Celtics are not a good rebounding team. They are a good rebounding team. They just weren't in this series, right? Because they were second or third in offensive rebounding for the entire NBA season, and that's what a lot of people continue to say. Like, you know what? They didn't get those. They didn't get that, and Joe talked about that as well too. Whereas, like, yeah, we try to play with a certain level of pace where we can get more percentages and get more bites at the apples and get more putbacks and things of that nature. That did not happen in the series. But in the regular season, again, third in offensive rebounding, seventh in offensive rebounding, third in total rebounding. So they were a good rebounding team. It just didn't show up in this series specifically. But ultimately, now, as we talk about where we're at now with the roster, it's a really interesting situation because, this roster, and shout out to Bobby Marks, who does a really great job of breaking down things. So we're borrowing his graphics here for our autopsy reports moving forward. So he'll do basically his version of an autopsy for me like that. He'll break down where they're at cap wise, what projected starting 5, 2-way guys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, but as this team now looks to try to transition, into the next iteration of its proverbial self, what are they really doing? Like they are not even a first apron team. So good, right? They have some flexibility. They have some picks coming up here. Okay, good. 27th, not amazing. Deep draft. Do they do something? But the combination of whether or not you feel like there's enough versatility on the roster, I just don't think there is, especially when it comes to play creation. Brown and Tatum are elite level guys, all-star NBA type guys, but having to do the scoring and the play creation on a regular basis is taxing. Derek White and Peyton Pritchard are not normal or principal point guards, right? They are combo guards who do a little everything, and Derek White is a monster defensively. But Peyton Pritchard isn't like this great table setter, so to speak. So is there opportunities to get that? But then how do you rotate and kind of suss out the minutes there? Does that come at the expense of playing Sam Hauser, long term? Do you think Ron Harper is somebody you can utilize long term? He's on a team option for next year. So does he come back, right? They have multiple guys on team options. I think Harper, Walsh, and obviously Amari Williams, I think those are guys who probably come back on that team option. Garza played well for them in spurts for this year, so probably, and I think they have to keep Keita, but Keita's going to be due for an extension, and that's something that they're going to ultimately need to figure out. But then again, how do you meld it together that's not just 3-point happy, where you can get some cutting, getting some easy baskets? And I think it goes back to what Brown said at the end of his pressers, like maybe they just need to play with a faster pace. Tatum is not a super fast guy, but in ways you're going to have to kind of figure out ways to speed up the game so you can get even more possessions while still trying to be a low turnover team, which they were for the majority part of the season. But I think for Boston, those are the things Brad Stevens ultimately needs to answer, because Joe's going to, as he said, he's going to play what's in front of him. And if this roster, as currently constructed, is 3-point happy, it's going to be hard to do anything else.
So I don't want to relitigate where you're coming from, but I'm going to slightly push back. When I say that I don't believe that the Celtics are a good rebounding team, I'm not looking at numbers. I'm just looking at what I aesthetically see in the game, and I look at how they play. I don't think how their style of rebounding this year is reflective of the type of style of basketball that they play. I think the numbers can speak to it, but I just don't believe that. And to this point, and we can transition over to the intangibles right now to kind of get this aspect out of the way. I think that's going to be some of the questions that have to be answered about what you're trying to build around, right? If the intent is that you're building around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, right? I think you're going to always have that situation or circumstance where the 2026? So what, the 2023 version, or is it 24? The 2024 version of the Boston Celtics, you have to have that style of that kind of play and rebounding accompanied with what you have with that roster, right? You need guys that can gang rebound, gang defense, gang up, because I don't think that, one, Jason Tatum is going to be as the elite defender as he is. I think that's going to be another year or two down the road, right? And you got to protect that. I think Jaylen Brown, as he is stepping up to be that kind of guy, though, he's becoming more of a perimeter person, right? I think I saw much more aggressiveness when Jason Tatum wasn't on the floor in the early part of the year. And a lot of those opportunities to get the free throw lines and things of that nature was because they weren't so reliant on that aspect of it. Maybe there was a much more half-court oriented offense that allowed Jaylen Brown to be that much more aggressive. So if that's going to be the case, and Jason Tatum is not going to be that other guy, he's not going to be that kind of aggressive, then you're going to have to get another guy that's going to accompany Jaylen Brown to play more downhill and allow there to be more opportunities to play with that pace and space that you're talking about. But it can't be just only him doing it, right? And to me, guys like Keita, guys like Garza, those kind of guys, they're not going to fit well if that's going to be the intent, right? They're going to be out of place. They don't have great hands at times. They're not great passers at times. So if they're not shooting, what purposes are they going to serve? That's to me is where this is going to be an interesting situation in the offseason about what this roster may actually look like and what Mazzulla is going to do with that roster to show the point of what we've been talking about regarding their inability to be versatile against teams that counter them or force them to have to change the way that their style of play?
I'll close by saying, for me, yes, all of the above. Brad Stevens also fresh off Executive of the Year. So the league has been impressed with what he was able to assemble. And then this team still finishing second in the Eastern Conference, and despite what's supposed to be a gap year. I trust that Stevens will figure out the right moves and levers, in essence, to pull, because he's shown us that he has, in essence, for this team to remain highly competitive. But now after a first round exit, it's it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow. And I don't say it's going back to the drawing board so much as like, all right, well, like you said, what are the things that we can now counter with? We have the core, we have the foundation, but how do we build around it? Porzingis and Drew Holiday were the unicorn pieces, in essence, that came in to kind of hired guns to do the job, in essence, and fill the roles at a highly capacitated level. They were over-indexed. They were not over-indexed. They were overqualified, for the roles that they had to play. And if that's what it takes for this team to reach that next level, I don't know that there's another rabbit in the hat that Stevens can pull out of, because I think it was very, really special. Then the next year, Porzingis had the mystery illness, and then and Holiday was also injured for a good majority of the year. Brown was dealing with the knee, and then Tatum ultimately goes down with the Achilles or whatever. And so fine, the excuses are there that they weren't fully right that next year, but as you said, they had opportunities. But Holiday and Porzingis, and even that year of Al Horford as well too, I don't know, like, if you can build that roster in the same way again, where it complemented each other so perfectly. And the thing that I always remember, we need to get off the Celtics, and I know this, but when they got to the finals, Tatum specifically, they were like, listen, we need to get to the basket. And Tatum started driving and then trying to get fouled. This is one of the lowest free throw shooting attempt teams. Not one of, they are the worst, 30th in free throw shooting attempts, because they're just jump shot heavy. And they're I won't say they're not necessarily not physical, but they're contact averse because they're shooting so many jumpers. So Stevens has his work cut out for him. Celtics are out of here, but tip our hats to Philadelphia 76ers, who did an amazing job, to take this series after being down 3-1. Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Joel Embiid, Quentin Grimes, Kelly Oubre, all these guys did their job in essence to get played to the next round, and they deserve to be lauded for that.
Absolutely. And listen, last point, shout outs to Nick Nurse. Nick Nurse has reopened a wound for Celtics fans about how they look at their head coach and what, he sees in comparison to, what we all were watching and what we were all witnessing. I don't want to be that person to say this may be considered one of the most, overhyped iterations of the Boston Celtics, because it wasn't but some 15 years ago, right, that we were going to have that conversation about Doc Rivers, when he should have probably had had multiple titles with the roster that he had, and they never lived up to those expectations. Injuries or not. And I feel like we're going to have these same kind of conversations with the way that the Celtics are losing in the playoffs. It's not so much the fact that I have a problem with the Celtics getting bested by a team that's just better than them. It's the problem that how they are losing, they seem to have it well within their hands to make changes to certain things, and they choose not to do so. They choose not to respect whoever the opposition is to make those adjustments when necessary. And I feel like it goes from bad to worse in our perception of what that this iteration of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum ultimately look like. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we got to put two more teams on the slab. Full slate. Don't go anywhere. But first, got to let you know, if you're grinding like it's the playoffs, the last thing you need to worry about is laundry. That's where No Scrubs comes in. They're the fastest wash and fold laundry delivery service out there. Your laundry is picked up, cleaned, folded, and back to you in as little as 4 hours. Same-day delivery, affordable pricing, handled by pros. Free up some time and let No Scrubs handle the dirty work. Head to 19mediagroup.com/sponsorship. Click the No Scrubs logo and get your game right. That's 19mediagroup.com/sponsorship and hit the No Scrubs logo. No wasted time, no weak energy, no scrubs. Coming up, Shaw and I put the Rockets on the slab. Don't go anywhere. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, a coveted Autopsy Report. It's time for us now to transition to a team that, listen, we had a lot of high hopes for them because they kind of looked the part, like something that wasn't, going on with this Denver Nuggets team the last couple of years, partly because Jamal Murray has not been 100% healthy. Aaron Gordon has been in and out of the lineup. And with everything that was going on with the Minnesota Timberwolves, we believe the Denver Nuggets were ripe for the picking. But I don't know if I was watching the Denver Nuggets show or the Boston Celtics, to me, they just seem like splitting images of each other. And now I think the sentiment in regards to this Denver Nuggets team is they're frauds. Our boy Jabari, I believe, he felt like he's like, can we stop now with this? If the Denver Nuggets fully healthy, you know what I'm saying? Respect them. They're probably going to be the biggest competition to the OKC Thunder because they got Jokic. And you know what? The Minnesota Timberwolves kind of proved me right, even though I was on the fence, that I just feel like in this iteration, the Minnesota Timberwolves will be the better team, right? Now, it's not saying that I was completely right because, like I said, when I watched the Denver Nuggets, I said if the Denver Nuggets were like they were during their championship run, they should be able to beat the Minnesota Timberwolves. Look, mine is Michael Porter Jr., man. There's no excuses. This was not a competitive series. And I think now there's a bigger question about the way that this roster is constructed. They're not able to deal with some of the upper echelon teams in either side of the conferences in a 7-game series, which has you wondering, is this more about the roster or is this more about the transition to Adelman now, who is their head coach?
Yeah, I'm not going to put too much on Adelman specifically. I will say this is, for me, a case of styles make fights. We've talked about this a little bit too, where the Nuggets were not trying to see Minnesota in the first round. They were not, because this is a team that seemingly now you can say has their number. But if we were talking about comparing things like for Boston, I don't think these splitting images. While I'm disappointed in Boston, also for personal reasons, I'm more surprised and shocked by what's happened here in Denver because of the injury factor. Like even going down 3-1, but no Anthony Edwards, for a good majority of the series. No DeSumo in the closeout game. And they let DeSumo torch them for 43, and whatever that was, game 4. What happened here? What what was this situation here that Minnesota was able to just muster up, the basketball gods and beat a mostly healthy Denver team? Yes, they need Aaron Gordon, but in this regard, maybe they are a little bit like Boston, where they need everybody. They need every single person in essence to make it right. And you just would have figured with them still having the best player, air quote, in the series, and then potentially maybe the second best player who did not play like it, they would have had an opportunity. But shout out to Jaden Mother effing McDaniels, who just tortured.
You look like Xavier McDaniels.
Just tortured them the entirety of the series, both by trash talking and with his play on the proverbial court. And now the Nuggets find themselves as a kind of, I don't want to say old, but a rickety team that's not as athletic as some of their counterparts in the Western Conference. And now they are also in the same situation, years removed from their championship. It's like, all right, well, what's next, right? And I'm hearing other people saying like Joker, multi-generational talent, et cetera, but the one championship is just that. It's the one championship. And so if we're trying to put him in the upper echelon of truly the all-time greats, will he have an opportunity in essence to get another chip? And it's looking less and less likely that this Nuggets team is going to be built in essence to do so. David Adelman, I think his schemes are solid, but they do need everything. They need Aaron Gordon. They need Peyton Watson. They need Christian Braun. And they didn't have all these guys for a good majority of the year. And even in this specific series, they got beat by a Minnesota team that was willing to hustle more than they were, but also was just game to the challenge and did not care about what they didn't have. They worried about what they did have. And I think that was a difference in the series.
Yeah, so they didn't have Aaron Gordon, but look, man, Aaron Gordon only played 36 games, in a regular season. And they still, amassed a pretty decent record. When someone says to me, say, hey, you didn't have your player, I'm like, yeah, I didn't have my player when I needed my player at his optimal level against a team that where you're needed to be at that optimal level, right? And I think that to me speaks volumes about where they're lacking. They're still lacking depth in that part of the lineup or that part of the roster. They don't have anything behind an Aaron Gordon that is going to allow them to still keep doing what they're doing. And I think, a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves who just don't let up, it's amazing because by all accounts, you would have thought that still having a healthy Jamal Murray, having a Cam Johnson, having all of these, Christian Braun, he was healthy, right? But they couldn't stop the Timberwolves backcourt. They couldn't. You know what I'm saying? And I think now this is becoming it's becoming indicative that one, they're undersized now when you really look at it, and two, they still lack depth to be able to compete with upper echelon teams. And there's going to be some work that has to be done if you're expecting to keep Jokic around. But I think the most important thing too that I look at it when I look at this Nuggets team that I think has been exposed is there just seems to be this lack of intensity or aggressiveness. I know people get on the whole thing with, Jokic, some of him and his cheap shots and stuff. I don't know if whether or not that's just always been his MO or whatever, but he doesn't have that same kind of bite, right? And it doesn't seem to resonate with the rest of the guys. I'm not saying that there's a problem. What I'm saying is that when I need my guy, my best player to go out there and make a statement, you know what I'm saying? It just doesn't feel like that's what Jokic does, right? Like, I still think that he's very, the word dogged seems to be the prevalent word. He seems very dogged in being the person that he needs to be for the game plan that the Nuggets have. Whereas I need to take over. I need to take charge. I need to do something, shake something up. And I don't know if he's looking for Jamal Murray to do that, if that's what the idea is. But when I need somebody to make a statement, I need Jokic doing that. And sometimes that's beating up Gobert in the middle of the in the post. Sometimes it's beating up McDaniels, on rebounds and putbacks and things. And that I never see that with him, especially in the playoffs, especially with teams that seem to have their number. And that, to me, I think is going to be something we're going to be looking at, regarding Jokic's legacy, but also with the way that team is constructed. If it's not going to be him, if we said that that's Aaron Gordon, you're never going to see that again from Aaron Gordon. Not for now. We don't know if it'll be for the next few years, but it won't be at the expense of saying that the Denver Nuggets will be back at the top of the heap because that's what you're getting from your top tier players.
Well, for sure, right? So, I mean, we kind of skipped over Musselman, so to speak, and kind of like grazed on it. But yeah, I think he's okay. I don't know that he's like the greatest X's and O's guys I've ever seen per se, but I think again he's dealing with what he has to deal with, and part of what he's dealing with is an ownership that has traditionally been relatively, let's just call it frugal, right? They don't want to go into taxes and aprons and things of that nature, so that it leaves the roster maybe a little bit lacking. And they thought they got a proverbial upgrade, and I'll switch it to the roster now, by getting Cameron Johnson, into this space and replacing Michael Porter Jr. We've been over this already. Like, this has not been the savings and upgrade that they thought it was going to be, either offensively or defensively. Did they save some money? Sure. But they've sacrificed a lot of what Michael Porter Jr. was able to give them, especially as a secondary offensive guy, and in most cases tertiary, because Jamal Murray is kind of the second leading scorer on this team. But nobody else was able to really pick up the slack there that MPJ clearly would have been capable. Again, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Everybody thought this was a great deal. Oh my God, look what they did. They saved it. Cameron Johnson's a better fit, better defender, blah, 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 blah. And it just ended up working out for them, in addition to Peyton Watson not playing one single minute in the series. Conspiracy theory here too, not to kind of take your Cowspiracy situation is, but I think I was reading somewhere too that Watson didn't. I'm sorry.
Said, please do run with it.
Well, that Watson didn't play because more or less he felt like he showed enough in essence to get the raise that he needed, and so I don't think he was faking the injury. He was clearly out, but he wasn't rushing to get back into the series, especially when it got off on the wrong foot. And he was like, listen, you know what? I won't say he was. People are saying that he might not have came back because he was trying to protect his contract status going into the summer. That's an interesting situation, right? If true, but again, that's all speculation here, and I have not sourced on that. Just reading the annals of the internet, so to speak. Valanciunas wasn't long for this roster; only played 4 games in the series. So you're right; it doesn't look great, I think, for them. And if at this point, I think we can say Aaron Gordon is habitually injured. So if you're consistently relying on him to be healthy, and he has to be there for you in essence to take the next step. I just don't know where this Nuggets roster ultimately goes. And if you're paying attention to the graphic here, for those who are listening to us audio-wise, $223 million in projected salary. That is second apron territory, and the Nuggets don't have a lot of flexibility
here. Yeah, they don't. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Edelman in that series go with a big lineup, having both Valanciunas and Jokic on the floor?
I mean, I think we might have seen it for maybe a few minutes. I don't remember specifically, but Valanciunas only played 4 of the 6 games. So at some point, he didn't play at all.
And again, I don't want to go backwards, but I think this is to that point, based on whatever style that Edelman, I think, wants to run or implement. I don't know if he actually is going to have the roster that has that kind of flexibility, right? Because in a situation like that, you would think that Valanciunas would basically bruise up and body up Rudy Gobert and allow Jokic to get open and do what he wants to do and has to do. But if there's no confidence in having those guys out there on the floor for X amount of minutes or whatever the case may be, especially in an elimination game or in a series in which you should be able to have the bigger front court, right? Never happened. I get it because Minnesota has Randall and you've got McDaniels, but you got to do something different. And again, we just find ourselves in that same space, especially if you're the Rockets as a team, as players. You got to do something different. Got to execute in a different way. Got to move the ball in a different way. And I don't know if whether or not I'm going to see that moving forward. They brought back Bruce Brown. When they won that championship run, Bruce Brown was like a Swiss Army knife. He rebounded. He defended. There were times where he was defending the opposing team's 5. Didn't see that in this series. Maybe they just don't buy into that. It's a very unusual way that we're looking at this team. But I think there's enough runway for us to be able to say, this is who they are, right? And at some point now, they're going to have to figure out what they can do with what they have, to your point, because of how knee-deep they are into that second apron.
Yeah, I'm curious, right? What ends up happening now with the roster construction and the overall vibes, and that to me, I think, is part of the intangibles for this team. Has it run its course? Has this core of Gordon, Murray, and Jokic said, "Listen, we cannot take it any further than we have due to some of our age and the injury concerns, etc." Joker had that injury this year. A lot of people say he didn't look right coming back from it. He was turning the ball over left and right. And then for the majority part of the series, he got outplayed, not numbers-wise, but the proverbial eye test by Rudy Gobert. Gobert made life hell for him. Like the final 2 games, Joker started to figure him out maybe a little bit there, but by then it was too late. And that's why I say this was so egregious to me that you would have felt the sum of the Nuggets parts with the experience that they had going against a sub-talented Minnesota team. It should have went to their favor, but it just didn't. And I think they've just kind of exhausted and they've stretched every last bit of this talent out of this group as currently constructed as they possibly can. And Adelman, again, I don't think he's in danger in any way, but the ownership group needs to figure out, is there a way to bring life back into this roster and not try to do it at the cost of saving money? But you have Joker, and what I think it was our governor or the general manager who said in the summer is like, yeah, well, the new rules with the second apron make things so hard to navigate. Joker or somebody goes down, and now you're thinking about having to trade Joker because, like, what are you going to do without this roster? And it said, oh, is he going to trade Nikola Jokic or whatever the case may be? And that's not what he meant. He meant to say it a different way than it came out. But now with them looking at things the way that they are, being ousted in the first round, with the injury concerns that they have, especially around Saran and Gordon, you do wonder, not that they're going to trade Joker, but are they really long for this competitive situation, or are they going to be content being, hey, a playoff bound team that doesn't actually have championship level aspirations?
I think to everything you said is spot on. I'm going to leave it with this, Shaw, before we have to transition to the next team. But to me, how you lose, I think, is now opening up a very interesting conversation about what the outlook is going to be for some of these teams, Boston Celtics, and in this case, the Denver Nuggets. To your point, you feel like the Denver Nuggets losing the way that they did, getting ousted the way that they did, is far more egregious than the Boston Celtics. I kind of beg to differ a little bit, but that's good because we both are seeing something where both organizations have the requisite talent, but collectively, they're not putting it together, or there's still something missing that is not allowing them to play at the highest level for an extended period of time. And it's something that's far beyond just guys getting injured. It's something that is far beyond, and I don't know where we're going to go with this until we get to that point of seeing what the roster is going to look like. And then maybe we get a better idea of what the organization thinks that they see from what the head coach sees, from even what the top tier players on their rosters see. But I clearly understand where you're coming from, and I completely agree with you. I don't know if the iteration of what this Denver Nuggets team is currently constructed as with Gordon, Jokic, and Murray, I don't think they can continue to function in this way because I don't see where they're going to wind up advancing any further than possibly just the semifinals, if at best. And even I don't even know if I have the confidence to say they'll get out of the first round with the way other teams are being put together in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, my closing point here is that maybe there is a little overreaction because it could be the fact that Minnesota has their number. Like it could be that, right? And we were all looking forward to a second round matchup where they're going to Joker versus Wemby and what that could have potentially looked like, and maybe they would have lost ultimately anyway. But I think when you're looking at the face of the Western Conference, OKC, San Antonio specifically, as proverbially now again injuries aside, as two teams that should consistently be here now for the next few years, and has the window for the Nuggets ultimately closed. But in theory, they could still consistently be a top 4 team. They just don't want any part of Minnesota. They want no part of that. Yeah. And at the end of the day now, how they try to triage this situation while trying to ultimately play catch up to OKC and San Antonio is something that we'll have to watch over the course of the summer. And we'll see if the general management and executive team there decide to do something drastic. But I think we're going to be here, same bat time, same bat channel next summer.
Absolutely. Coming up, Shaw and I are going to put the Houston Rockets on the slab. Do not go anywhere.
You've earned this. Now it's time to embark on your own personal adventure. Book your vacation with Exquisite Travel and Tours today. Explore the world and discover yourself.
We're back. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time for us to put the Houston Rockets on the slab. And look, maybe this might be the team that might fit itself like right in the middle of our extreme points of view, where I am more highly disappointed in the Boston Celtics, and you are obviously more highly disappointed in the Denver Nuggets. But there's a team I think we can collectively just be highly disappointed in, is this Houston Rockets team. Now, with that being said, I think most people are looking at it as saying, well, they still should have beaten the LA Lakers because they didn't have Luka Doncic, and they didn't have Austin Reeves for most of the series. I was just one person who just firmly believed that a team like how the Houston Rockets were constructed from last year to this year, if you told me that adding Kevin Durant was supposed to be the quote unquote answer to this situation, I'd have told you no, but they're still going to be good enough to get themselves where there's a competitiveness to them, or there's something where whoever they're matched up against, they're going to give themselves a chance. And I think what they've just proven is that they're clearly still not ready. But I think also this exit in the first round and what we've seen over the stretch of this year, it feels like one piece falls out of place with this Houston Rockets team, and it just goes sideways so bad, which is hard to a hard pill to swallow, because you can't operate in that kind of space and expect to advance with the type of teams that are in the Western Conference. But lo and behold, that's exactly what took place when we saw the Houston Rockets get knocked out.
I feel for Houston, they had enough to make this more competitive than it ultimately was. But just getting off to, the 0-3 situation is just, it's ridiculous. And I think, understanding that Durant was only available for one of the games, that was going to ultimately change the complexity of the series. So in hindsight, in some ways, it's not that bad, but it started off in a way that it just like we didn't really expect. And so for me, and this is almost kind of like shade at the Lakers, so to speak, while we were talking about, can LeBron pull one more thing out of his proverbial hat and add another feather into his proverbial cap? All those things, I think it's not as exciting because the Rockets weren't right? And they didn't have KD majority part of the series. And that ultimately flips a narrative, I think, for Houston's proverbial outcome. But I don't know. We've talked about the Celtics. We talked about the Nuggets here in this week's show. I'm trying to think of between Mazzulla and Udoka, ironically, both who have Celtics ties, are there more stubborn coaches in the NBA? With Thibs now out of the league, right? Are there more coaches who are so hell-bent, dogged, as you said, in their proverbial approach that they will not get out of their own way? And Udoka, I think, especially with his lack of offensive imagination, is starting to become an issue. But at the end of the day, what were they going to do, especially without the proverbial hired gun that they were supposed to have for this series and what they hope to be plenty more? But I think, I was talking about Udoka, his job might be in trouble. They have enough built-in excuses here now that I think the general managementship, the governorship can all say, well, no Van Vliet, no Steven Adams, Durant only played one game. We can get better and we'll be okay. But they have got to figure out, and Udoka specifically has got to figure out a way to get more out of this offensively. And I don't think it's just Fred VanVleet coming back and Kevin Durant being healthy. They just need more versatility.
Yeah. So just as you were talking about the Boston Celtics being one of the worst teams in pace, guess who was worst?
Sure. Yeah.
Houston Rockets, right? Now, I'm not a person who's always a big believer in pace, but I'm sorry. You look at this roster, the way that it's constructed, and it's either that you don't believe that they're better with their younger players out on the open court in transition, moving the ball at a much higher pace, or to your point, because it's Udoka, you've got a very steadfast player in Van Vliet. You got a very steadfast scorer in Sengun. You got a very steadfast scorer, elite scorer in Kevin Durant. But you know what that does? It compromises the Amen Thompsons of the team. It compromises the Jabari Smiths of the team. Those guys just don't know how to play half-court basketball in the context of what it means in the grand scheme of things of the NBA playoffs. And unless you have those other components out there on the court to help give you that balance and versatility, this is the outcome of what you're basically going to see. And to your point, that's on Udoka, because this was the same crap that he pulled when we had the Celtics and not having versatility in the backcourt. He had to work with Marcus Smart, and I said he did a fantabulous job with Marcus Smart given the circumstances. But this is what happens when teams force you into playing a certain kind of way. Do you have the roster and do you have the wherewithal to transition guys to play and operate in a different space? In this particular case, that didn't happen. So for me, that's partly the disappointment, right? Because we knew that this was coming. This was going to happen all along. So either you double down and get the best out of these guys in that situation or circumstance, or you got to figure out a way to make it work with the roster and what they can do best. And he never put them in a position to do that. The best players that were on the court that gave them an advantage never were able to thrive in that series against the LA Lakers. You know what I'm saying? They couldn't, because they refused to move and pick up the pace and things of that nature. Opportunities for Sengun to be more aggressive never gave him the chance and opportunities in doing so. And that's because they were so dependent on Kevin Durant. They were so dependent on having that guy and the ball going through him and everything executed through him. And this again is going to come down to bite the Houston Rockets, because going into next year, you're going to have to wonder what version of this Rockets team is going to be sustainable for the course of an NBA season to position themselves to be, again, another high seed and then fall short because they cannot counter when a team forces them into a style of basketball that they're not comfortable.
Yeah, well, they also have to fix the vibes and the energy, and that also is a Udoka situation. Like how he treats and talks to players, all that stuff. I think how Durant treats and talks to players, it is all kind of coalescing. I don't know. I don't think I was ever on the Reed Shepherd bandwagon. I was on the bandwagon shows like he needs more minutes, but I think I'm getting enough of a sample size to say like, well, maybe he's not going to reach the elevations and levels that people have projected upon him. That doesn't mean he won't have a long career and won't be a good basketball player, but this, hey, he's like whatever people were expecting him to be as this shooter and pseudo play creator. I haven't seen enough of it to give me a certain level of confidence. And the season wasn't necessarily lost when Fred VanVleet went down. I think it's like, fine, let's give a man an opportunity to see what he can do as a play creator, get him some reps there, kind of like Devin Booker and Phoenix. Like, let's put him at point guard and like, just, hey, he's going to trial by fire type situation. But to me, the season was lost at the trade deadline when they had enough of a sample size to realize like this wasn't the right move, right? And now we're mixing in Josh Okogie and others into the starting lineup, just kind of like being matchup based. Like, why didn't you go out there and get a creator, right? Why not get a point guard who could have been a more traditional table setter? When
you say get a creator, are you saying get a creator for everyone else, or getting a creator, primarily for Kevin Durant? Because I could, we watched a good number of Rockets games. Durant was almost like a primary ball handler. Like, the ball was in his hands in most occasions and most times. Not to say that the intent was to take it out of Amen Thompson, but it seemed like it was always through those two guys. And they're dynamically different type of players in which they're not true play creators for everybody else.
That's what I'm saying. I think I think everyone was like, oh, they needed a Fred VanVleet, and clearly that wasn't going to happen. So you needed a Fred VanVleet light, right? Somebody who was going to be more pass first, you know what I mean? And maybe should knock some things down. And I don't know what it would have taken in essence to try to extrapolate that and how much of your future you would need it to mortgage. But to me, Houston and Detroit, they're in the, as we're recording, in a game 7, like, they took the season for granted. An NBA lifespan or an NBA season is fragile. Like, and if you have an opening, you gotta go for it. And like they're taking the cautious approach, like, oh well, let's see, let's give our guys time to mature, and maybe this guy can do it, maybe this guy can do it. And I don't know, for some it seems painfully obvious, like you need a little something else. And to me, for Houston, that was apparent very, very early on. And now we have to flip things to the roster where, hey, like, what can they really do? They have some money, they have some picks, not necessarily in this year's draft, but they have future picks that they can trade if they wanted to. They've sniffed around the Giannis conversation. I don't know if that's going to ultimately happen. Sengun also talked about it in the postgame presser. I was like, yeah, I want to be here. Obviously, I want my guys to work hard. We want to run it back. But being a part of rumors is part of an NBA life. Like, that's what's just going to happen. So whether or not this team tries to make a bigger swing and try to build around Kevin Durant and Amen Thompson, primarily, I think, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. I think they like Fred VanVleet just even as a stabilizing force and hope that he'll be back. But Sengun, Jabari Smith, maybe even Reed Shepherd, I think these are all players that is like, like, if we can get something better, maybe we would.
I'm gonna say this because maybe this might lead us into the intangibles part about this, but this is just me, Shaw. If you're gonna have this 2026-27 version of the Rockets, I don't think it can be with Kevin Durant, Jabari Smith, and Sengun as part of your front court or your starting front court lineup. I think you're gonna have to lose one or two guys if you're trading to bring in a quality player. But I don't see the chemistry with those three guys as their front court. I just don't. And people might tell me differently, might speak to me differently, but the numbers don't reflect what I think the expectations are for how this Rockets team should operate and play. I don't think that they naturally vibe off each other. I don't see that one person is going to be aggressive and feeds off of the next person. Like that's something that we can at least say when Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum get together. That's something that we can kind of say when we see Jokic and Murray. They vibe with each other, they play off of each other, and in most cases, we're like, it's worked, right? It's yielded results. Now they may need another piece, another part. But I just don't see where those three guys fit in. Primarily to me, I think the odd man out really should be Jabari Smith. But he might be a Udoka guy. So I think that it winds up being Sengun. I don't know how you trade off 20-something points per game, 7.8 rebounds and stuff. But if Durant is still on this roster, he still wants to be on this roster. And even if you bring back VanVleet, he comes back, he's 100%. This iteration, this starting five, is not a workable starting five that's going to contend. They're going to have to do something, and it's going to probably need to be a big move where it really puts them in a better position to offer up the versatility that we're talking about, but it's not working with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I won't disagree, from that lens, right? So I just don't think they see it that way. And I think they're hinging everything on VanVleet returning. I think Jabari Smith has solid guy. I just remember the beginning of the season, which seems like forever ago, but I talked to you about this on the show already as well too. He came out that first game, hey, I'm trying to be most improved player. Like, this is what I'm looking to try to do. And I don't think he sniffed that. I'm not talking about the award per se. I'm just talking about in terms of making the proverbial steps that are necessary to be the linchpin piece of a roster. I don't think he's elevated himself in that way and covered himself in glory. The same thing with Reed Shepherd. I just don't think those two pieces are as good as advertised or as good as they need to be for Houston to take that next step. But could they go somewhere else and then ultimately figure it out? Potentially. But will we see Amen, KD, Sengun, Jabari Smith, Fred VanVleet all play together again next season? I think there's going to be some serious conversations about that and some serious rumors. And then you do have to wonder, with the rumors, if nothing gets done, is a guy like Sengun supposedly able to now come back and just be a professional? Hey, you threw my name out, you're trying to get all this. I believe I saw an article. I did absolutely see an article before over the weekend where Houston is expected to go after Giannis, Joel Embiid, not expected to go after, are going to inquire about Giannis, Joel Embiid, Kawhi Leonard, and somebody else that I can't remember right now too. So those are all really big names. I don't know that any of them would be available, to this team for what they have available to offer. But it does signify to me, if this report is led to be true, that Houston understands that they are not as close as they thought they were, and a big shakeup is probably on the horizon.
Absolutely. Awesome show this week, Shaw. I mean, so much stuff to get into. I know we spent a good portion of our conversations about the Boston Celtics, and also with regards to the Denver Nuggets. But I think through the course of the year, we leaned in a lot, with regards to the Houston Rockets and the troubles that we saw with them. And then I think, again, too, I think the bigger question was what these guys ultimately did in the first round of the playoffs to either solidify our perspective, the questions that we had, or to put exclamation points, on the things that we didn't get right about them. And I think a lot of that stuff is, primarily, been answered. And, again, maybe from where I'm coming from and where you're coming from, we beg to differ on the level of disappointment that really should be aired out there, about these teams respectively. But how these teams lost, how they exited, I think speaks volumes to a much longer term conversation that has to be had, because to us, this is what the outlook is going to be for these teams over the next couple of years. And the only way that you get to exercise those demons is you have to come back next year and you have got to play at such an elevated level, right? Be either a top 1-2 seed and basically run roughshod over everybody to kind of help us change our worldview focus about what these teams are and what they've looked like over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but disagree at the same time. I don't think the regular season is going to prove anything to me for any one of these teams. Like, it's all going to be all playoff runs and what they do. Denver, I think more specifically, they need to potentially exercise them demons against the Minnesota Timberwolves and not run from them, ultimately. But I have nothing in me believes that, hey, a 55, 58 win Celtics team next year is going to be formidable. Nothing. I'm just like, well, we'll see when we get there.
You're just done.
No, I just don't believe it.
I guess the way I'm looking at it is I'm looking at the regular season as a litmus test on ensuring or being better at the things that we are saying is rearing its ugly head in the narrow scope of the playoffs. I'm not saying that it answers them, but I'm saying I want to see better of those circumstances and situations of which they allow themselves to be put into that. And if they don't do it, then I'm not going to be surprised by this is how they're going to get exited. This is how they're going to wind up on our table come 364 days from now.
Yeah, and again, I'm just reiterating what I said. All three of these teams are going to need to have playoff success, not regular season ones. In essence, to exercise some of the demons here. Like there is a stink, I think, on Boston and Denver more specifically, because these were pretty egregious losses, like pretty egregious. And I think Houston has some built-in excuses and safeguards that they can convince themselves otherwise. But we'll see you guys later. So Boston, Denver, and Houston didn't expect to be here, but we are where we're at. And shout out to the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Los Angeles Lakers, and obviously the Philadelphia 76ers for taking care of business in a way that we did not probably appropriately give them credit for going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and rest in peace to Spirit Airlines as well, too. I believe that all three places we just talked about were locations.
Yeah, well, less flights to Cancun, I guess. But
right, exactly. They've all now changed their destination locations now. Absolutely. Once again, man, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board with us for the baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on with us this week, and we'll catch up with you